Hello and welcome to I Have Gnosis Tarot. My name is Ewan and today we are looking at a tarot spread tutorial. And this tarot spread tutorial will be about the Temple of Love spread, which is a relationship reading. Now, the Temple of Love is a name that I've given it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. We can use this spread in any kind of relationship reading, whether that be to do with families, friends, work colleagues. It doesn't really matter as long as there's some form of relationship involved. We can use this reading, and indeed we can use this in a past context, so previous relationships. We can use this in the present context of current relationships, and of course we can use this spread if we're thinking about prospective relationships. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to go over the basic structure of the Temple of Love spread using the beautiful throught tarot deck, and then I'll go through this specific reading to show you how I have read the cards together to come to a conclusion. Now, this reading will be for a romantic relationship, and it is a current romantic relationship. And without further ado, we shall go straight into the structure of the spread. So, to begin with, this is quite a simple tarot spread, the Temple of Love. There are a lot of cards, but it is perhaps easier to read than even a Celtic cross spread, as there is quite a lot of sequence with this spread, which makes it easy to understand. As you can see, it's in this kind of temple-like structure. So, on this side, we have a column, and this column is the querence column. So this represents the person who has come to the tarot reader, or indeed the tarot reader themselves if you're doing a personal reading. And when we look at this column, we see 3 cards. Now, the top card is the thoughts of the querent about the relationship. The middle card are the feelings of the querent towards the relationship. And the bottom card are the actions of the querent towards the relationship. And when we look at the other side of the spread, we have another column. And this column is the same as the previous one, except for this is for the other person or other party in question. Because you can, of course, do relationships to mundane things such as your job, but here this is another person. And again, we have the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions towards the relationship. Now, these cards at the top, next to the columns, represent what both parties bring to the relationship. So here we have what the querent brings, and here we have what the other person brings. And at the heart of it all, at the centre of the temple, we have the current status of the relationship. Finally, we have these 3 cards which create the foundation of the relationship, and these are ironically the future cards. So we have the near future, the mid future, and the far future of this relationship. And these are, of course, time context to the querent's question at hand. So, for example, the question here is, what will this relationship be like in the next year? So in this respect, we have quite a broad timeline at the bottom here. We could even say this could be groups of 4 months. So the next 4 months, the 4 months after, and 4 months after that in the next year. Or indeed, if there is a time limit up to the new year, we could, at the time of this reading, this is, we're now in April, so we could do this in groups of 3 months. So this could be the next 3 months, 3 months after that, and then here the end of the year, just before January. And indeed, that will be how this reading will be interpreted. So there's the basic structure of the Temple of Love spread. And of course I could leave the video here now, but what I'm going to do is go into the details of this particular spread, just to give you an idea of how I read these spreads. So as always, I always start with the querence column, and right here in the thoughts we have the Emperor. This is the divine masculine made manifest, major arcana, and the card that rules Aries. And at the time of this recording, we are currently in Aries season. This is very apt. And indeed, the Emperor in the thoughts position very much seems to imply that no matter the gender of this individual, this relationship has awakened a sense of masculinity within this individual. And again, it does not matter what gender or sexual preference you have, we have both masculine and feminine within us. This individual may feel a sense of responsibility, a sense of nurturance towards the divine feminine, both within themselves and their partner, and indeed a sense of fulfilling the role of the philosopher king, the ideal king, very much a Aragorn kind of archetype from the Lord of the Rings, the responsible monarch. Now, of course, we do have a shadow aspect to the Emperor, which is about over-control and being perhaps a bit too brash and blunt. I think as we go through the reading, we'll see that that is perhaps not the case, and we are looking here at the well-dignified interpretation of the Emperor card. And this is supported by what is happening in the heart of this individual, the feelings towards the relationship. And they very much feel here with the 9 of discs, which is the 9 of pentacles in other tarot decks. They have a lot to gain from this relationship materially. Now, we could say that this could be interpreted as something that is perhaps ill-dignified. For example, marrying into money, or a relationship partner who has a lot of material possessions, like, for example, a house and a good job. But I think as we go through the rest of the reading, especially with this virtue card here, this is the more well-dignified aspect of the 9 of discs, which is the concept of endless material gain. In other words, there's a lot that these two could do in the material world together. So this isn't I don't think this is about resources. This is about the material pleasures of life and the well-dignified aspect of that. So just enjoying the world together, essentially. However, in the actions position, we have the 5 of Swords. And I'm not going to lie, the 5 of Swords is perhaps one of the most difficult cards in the tarot, bar the 9 and 10 of Swords. And its name is Defeat. And here we have Venus in Aquarius. And of course, Aquarius is not a very emotional sign, and Venus is. And I think here, whilst it's not in the feelings position, there are actions towards the relationship which are making the querent perhaps overthink it, and the overthinking is leading to actions that are self-sabotaging. So for example, they may feel that this relationship is too good to be true, and in that sense they will start falling back on old behavioural patterns because of their mind, because the swords represent the mind, and here in the actions position we're very much seeing a top-down effect. And now you may ask, but hang on a minute, we have the Emperor in the thoughts position. Well, all this is the primary thoughts going on. There will be probably subliminal thoughts going on in the background, which tend to be the case with self-sabotaging, which are affecting the actual actions. So whilst this individual may feel like they're stepping into their masculine energy, they are still holding back from fulfilling what they want in this relationship. So this is a card that we can perhaps work on as an individual if we wish to see the rest of the spread carry out with good fortune and good dignity. And indeed, the fives in all the suits encourage us to make a change. We go from a stable but, shall we say, stagnant 4, and then this forces us to make a change. So perhaps this individual is realizing their self-sabotaging habits, and it's finally come the time when they must let go of them and destroy these self-sabotaging habits if they want to make this relationship a success. Because of course, the card that follows the 5 of Swords is the Science card, the 6 of Swords, which means that we've tried and tested things, and now we've come to a conclusion of how to live a more virtuous and objective lifestyle. So before we come to what the querent brings to the relationship, we're going to look at the other person. Now, funnily enough, we have another 5 here in the thoughts position, which seems to echo the actions of the other individual. And this is the 5 of Discs, also known as the Worry card. Now, having looked at the querent, we could interpret this card in a number of ways. The simplest and the isolated meaning of this card could simply be that there is a lot of worry about this relationship. And I think this is a worry about losing it, because really the 5 of Discs is about a fear of loss, and a fear of loss of material possessions. I think here the relationship itself is the material possession. Perhaps this individual is quite used to seeing relationships as a material asset in their life, and they're afraid that they may do something that causes the tower to fall, and this is something we will of course come to later in the reading. Now, the less simple and more complex interpretation of this card, and of course the two could be happening at the same time, is that the self-sabotaging actions of the querent may be causing the other person to think they are doing something wrong. So for example, this person, the querent, may be holding back and not contacting them maybe as much as they maybe should be doing or could be doing. And this is making the other person feel perhaps that they have done something wrong and that they should be doing more. But in reality, it has nothing to do with them, and it's more to do with this individual's self-sabotaging habits. And of course, it could be both, in the sense that, in both interpretations of this card that I've just gone through, in the sense that this person may be worrying that because this person is holding back that they don't care, and by extension they feel worried that they will lose this person in their life. And when we go to the heart position, we can see that it may be driving this swiftness card, the 8 of Wands, which is Mercury in Sagittarius. And these are fast, expansive thoughts, but driving the heart here. So we could be having a lot of worry here, or one particular worry, which is causing this individual to maybe rush towards the relationship. And we're not saying that rushing is bad or good. It's simply there is a drive to spark something. And maybe it is driven by this fear. But conversely, we can say that this rushing of the energy within us towards the relationship and really wanting to open our heart chakra may also be caused by the actions of this individual. And quite lovely, we have the love card in a love reading. The 2 of Cups. It is when we have consciousness meeting consciousness, and this individual They very much feel like they want to be expressing their love in a physical way. So we are talking cuddles, kisses, all these kind of things. And indeed, they really feel like perhaps that they want to be doing it now. This is very much the kind of feeling of, I wish I was there with them, but I can't be at the moment, and it might be because this person is perhaps holding back. And this is causing a great deal of worry. So you can see here how these two cards are causing this, and this, so this also may be causing this. However, the Nine of Discs and the Emperor card, I think these are very perhaps hidden in the mind of the querent, or perhaps we could say, just as the Five of Swords is reflected by the Five of Discs, this feeling of love, this is after all Cancer, Venus in Cancer, which is a very feminine energy, is reflecting the masculine energy of the querent here. So just do the wand here, we see this connection here and a connection here. And indeed we could add another interpretation that the two heart positions are also causing a connection whereby they both realise there is so much they could do together, and there seems to be this urge to want to do it now. So, gone through both columns of the reading. Now we're going to go into what both people bring to the relationship. Here we have two fours, and this is very interesting actually when we look at these two fours, because the wands are primarily a masculine energy, and here we have Venus in Aries, so this is complementing the Emperor card and the Love card we have here. And here we have the Cups, which are a feminine energy. And here we have the Moon in Cancer. So once again, we are complementing the Canceria card here in the Love. And also it is creating the feminine to this masculine. And indeed, the Moon is also a very feminine symbol. So what do these both mean? Well, not only do we see how these cards are being essentially formed by what we've seen in the two columns, but the Four of Wands is known as the completion card, and is perhaps the easiest four card to work with. Whilst Venus is in its detriment in Aries, in the tarot we understand that this is the union of the divine feminine with the divine masculine. Of course, we see the ram's head of Aries here, and the dove, which represents the feminine Venus. So, to put it bluntly, this individual is bringing a sense of completion to both people's lives. There is a sense of an end of a journey, perhaps for both of them, and this person represents the end of that journey, both for themselves and the other individual. Now, a more literal reading of this card is a marriage. However, we would have to ask the querent as to whether this is really something that they have in mind, but of course it can just be a partnership that is long-lasting and indeed committed. And this is reflected by the Three of Wands here that we see in the current status of the relationship, but we will come to that in a minute. So what about the Four of Cups? So the Four of Cups is not a difficult card, but it's more difficult than the Four of Wands. This is because the Four of Wands has the energy to keep the four going. Four is a very stable and potentially stagnant number, but the energy of the Wands keeps the wheel turning, so to speak. However, the Four of Cups doesn't quite have that energy. Water is more passive and reflective, and the Four of Cups is known as luxury. And this is essentially being content, not in a spiritual sense though, but rather in an emotional sense. We could say the completion card is spiritual contentment, and this is emotional contentment. So this is stability of emotions. It's not exciting, but it's also not scary. It's just right. It's the Goldilocks card but it does have a potential to get a bit bored. And this is why we have the 5 of Cups that follows afterwards, which leads, of course, to the 6 of Cups, which is pleasure. Now, when we come to look at the future cards, we can see that this card is potentially going to be overturned, but for the benefit of both parties. So I think for now, and this is very much reflected in the 3 of Wands, this is a good thing that the other person is bringing to the relationship. They are bringing emotional stability to both parties, and this indeed may be a reflection of the spiritual stability that the other person is bringing, and vice versa, because the Wands and the Cups are, of course, partners. And now we come to the central card from both of these. So this is the Virtue card, the 3 of Wands. And just a little note, in the tarot, if you ever get a card which is getting a smaller number after the previous cards, this is a good sign, because we are getting closer to reality, which is the number 1, the whole. So what we're seeing here is that a stability of emotion and a stability of spirit is leading to virtue, which is the sun in Aries, in which the sun is exalted in Aries. And indeed, we see a further reflection of this masculinity here. And what this card is really confirming is not only that the 2 4 cards each other are bringing to the relationship are virtuous and well dignified, but it is also confirming the well dignified aspect of the Emperor, which I talked about earlier, as well as the love card here. And it's, if we get that wand and we draw a line, we can see how the 2 cards are coming together to create this virtue. And the reason why this is virtue is because essentially we have energy that is in harmony. And I believe in this spread, the energy, the consciousness, the spirituality of this relationship is allowed to be harmonious because of this balance we have, this stability in both parties. Now, if we were to put the wand the other way around, we can see essentially the challenge to this virtue. And the challenge here is to let go of the fear of loss for the other person and to stop self-sabotaging for the querent. In a way, we can see this dynamic is pulling towards virtue. This dynamic is pulling away from virtue. So this is a very, very good card to have for relationship reading in the central position. And now we're going to see where it will lead in the future. And again, this is going to happen over the year. This is being done in April at the moment, this reading. So this will be happening in the next 3 months. This will be happening in 3 months after, and this will be happening at the end of the year. So, what will be happening very soon? We have the Empress card, which is absolutely fantastic. Whenever we get an Emperor and an Empress in a love reading, we have really hit the jackpot. Because what this is essentially saying is that the ability of this individual to cease their self-sabotaging and really endorse their masculinity leads to this material gain, a balance of energy, which of course leads to a virtuous relationship, but it also brings out the divine feminine of the relationship. Now, if you remember me saying that the Emperor is the philosopher king, this is because philosopher is a Greek word which means love of wisdom, philosophia. And the wisdom that he loves is the divine feminine. The Empress card, of course, comes before the Emperor card. And this is the concept that the universe is inherently feminine, and that masculinity is the discord that makes it a little bit spicy. So by the querent endorsing their divine masculinity, no matter the gender, they are bringing out the feminine for both individuals, and this leads to a very harmonious and peaceful relationship, because she is also a number 3, just like the 3 of Wands. And indeed, when we look at the Empress, she shares essentially the same colour palette as the 2 of Cups. She is the embodiment of love, for she is wisdom. However, we have perhaps one of the most dreaded major arcana after that, and it is dreaded simply because no one likes sudden change, and the Tower card very much represents sudden change. And I believe, looking at this reading, we are looking at the dynamic we talked about here, whereby the virtue of this relationship brings out the masculinity and the femininity within both individuals, creating this stability. And I think this is something that neither party has experienced before, and because of that will cause a major downfall of these 5s that we see. This Tower moment, given that it's surrounded by these wonderful cards, suggests that it is indeed getting rid of the ill-dignified cards here, or the difficult cards, should I say. So this virtue of the relationship, I believe it will cast aside the worries of the other individual, and finally nip the self-sabotaging habits of the querent in the bud. And of course, if these are habits of the individual, then this is why it will be a Tower moment, because we are essentially exercising, transmuting, and rebirthing an aspect of ourselves. And in every relationship there is sacrifice, and I believe that the sacrifice being made here are the 5 of Swords and the 5 of Discs, which of course create a virtuous relationship. In other words, there is virtue in sacrifice, and this is very much the embodiment of Shiva, and this is the Eye of Shiva, the god of destruction in Vedic traditions. And then finally we have the Fool card, the first card of the entire tarot. The Fool is the no thing that is everything, because if everything is the same, then there is no such thing as a thing. This is the space into which the entire universe unfolds and unfolds from. And in the tarot, this card generally represents throwing ourselves into life and not knowing what's going to happen. And I think perhaps that this 5 of Discs and the 5 of Swords are habits, and as we've said, the habits have been overthrown. This gives a great sense of freedom now for both individuals. And of course, in the time context of this reading, this will be around October, November and December. In other words, the world is now their oyster. Let's see what we can do. So, as we've said, with the time context, this Tower moment will of course be happening around July, August and September. So this summer for these individuals is going to really question them and not force but encourage them to exercise these more difficult aspects of the relationship, which are being caused by themselves. So this is not necessarily a conflict between the individuals. Had we had perhaps the 5 of Swords in the Thought's position, then yes, this might be a conflict. But as they're crossing over this virtue, we can see this is something that both individuals need to work on themselves. But of course, they are helping each other to do it. So that has been the interpretation of the Temple of Love spread, and I hope you've gained some sort of understanding about how to read this for yourself if you wish to use this spread in your divination. And before we close the video, I will just go through the shadow card. So the shadow card is a card I always take from the bottom of the deck, and it tends to be a warning. If you are used to reading reversals in tarot, which I do not, the shadow card can be read as a reversal. But it's essentially asking us to look out for this and try not to fall into the pitfalls of this card. So we're looking at the ill-dignified reading of this card. And here we pulled the Seven of Discs. This is Saturn in Taurus. It's very much material lessons. It's known as the failure card. And these, I've heard it said, and I do agree, that this is failure in terms of little failures, not one giant failure. And one giant failure is more the Ten of Swords energy. So here, the shadow card is really asking both parties to not fear essentially making mistakes. And that the mistakes, if they do make them, will be lessons. And I think we see this here by the 2 5s. Indeed, the Seven of Discs has a very similar colour palette to the 5 of Discs, and they are both Taurus cards. And again, this is asking both querents to be okay with getting things wrong. And indeed, I believe if both parties can come to terms with that and be empathic towards each other's mistakes, they will be able to create this completion, this luxury, combining the Emperor with the Empress. And when they do so, it will overthrow these fears, and now they are free to do what they want with their lives. And I believe this will be together due to the dignity of most of the cards in this spread. Indeed, the vast majority of the cards in this spread. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening or night wherever you are in the world. And of course, if you liked the video, do hit that like button. It really helps with the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. And I do individual readings for the zodiac signs, and I do tutorials for each of the individual cloth cards, as there's a lot of symbolism within each card. And of course, I do lots of tarot tutorials like this too. So thank you very much for watching again, and I will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.